we know that variations arise due to errors in DNA replication during cell division. But these variations are rare and slow. Now, if we increase the rate of errors, the variations would increase, but the newly formed cell may not remain viable. So, to make new variations, to speed up the process, sexual reproduction is required. During sexual reproduction, DNA from two sources combine and new combinations are produced. So, with sexual reproduction, there are new combinations and variations are generated. But two problems arise. Before we go into the problem, let's have a look at the characteristic features of sexual reproduction. Two parents are involved usually. There is formation of gametes and the gametes formed are haploid. It is very elaborate, takes a lot of time, is complex and slow, and the offsprings are not identical to parents, that is, variations are produced, which is the purpose of sexual reproduction. Why variations are important? Because these variations form the basis of evolution. They help in development of new characters. Now, coming back to the problems. Problem number 1, sexual reproduction means fusion, which means doubling of chromosome number. Two gametes fuse with each other and contribute both their chromosomes to the zygote that is formed. So, chromosome number is doubled. The second problem is, if the zygote is to grow and develop into an organism which has highly specialized tissues and organs, then for the time being, the zygote should have enough energy. It should have enough energy to survive till the time these organs and tissues have completely developed. This is how it happens in higher organisms. Now, what are the solutions? The solution to problem number 1 is meiosis or reduction division. You've studied last year that during meiosis, 4 new cells are produced with half the chromosome number. So, before sexual reproduction, gametes are formed through a special type of division, that is meiosis, so that the gametes have half the chromosome numbers. These gametes, when they fuse, will have the full chromosome number again. Now we come to the second problem. To solve this problem, in higher organisms, the gametes are specialized. So, in higher organisms, plants and animals, the male gamete is small and carries not much except the genetic material from the male parents. But the female gamete is large and carries stored food. With this short introduction, let's study about sexual reproduction in flowers. But before that, a little bit about the flower. This is the flower. You've seen it so many times. Let's just review the parts. Starting from the bottom, the sepal, the colorful petals, the pistil and the stamen. Now let's review each of these parts in detail. Flower is a modified shoot. It is specially made for reproduction. So the reproductive parts in flowers are classified into two groups: the primary sex organs and the secondary or the accessory organs. The primary sex organs are the parts which produce the male and the female gametes. They are the stamen, collectively called the androecium. They produce the male gamete, and the pistil or the gynoecium, which produces the female gamete. Then there are these accessory parts, the petals and the sepals. These help in the technical aspects of reproduction, protecting, ensuring gamete transfer, etc. The petals are together known as the corolla, and the sepals are together known as calyx. Petals help to attract insects for pollination and sepals protect flower in bud stage. Now flowers can be unisexual or bisexual. Unisexual is one when they either have the stamen or the male part or the pistil or the female part. They never have both. Common examples are papaya and watermelon. Bisexual is when they have both the stamen and the pistil. Example is hibiscus and mustard. Now the two primary parts of flowers are the stamen and the pistil. Stamen is the male reproductive part. It has you can see a long and slender filament or the stalk, and at the tip is the anther. The anther contains the pollen which will have the male gamete. Now the second primary part is the pistil, which is present in the center of the flower. This is the female reproductive part. It is made up of three parts. The swollen part at the bottom is known as the ovary. This ovary contains the ovule. The middle long part is known as the style, and at the tip is the stigma. The stigma might be sticky because it has to trap the pollen. This is the place where pollen released from the stamen will land. So stigma is supposed to trap the pollen. Now the ovary contains the ovule. So each ovule will have at least one egg cell. Now we have to study the pollen which lands on the stigma. How does this pollen reaches the egg cell or the female gamete here in the ovule? Now, this is how the pollen reaches stigma from anther if the two are on the same flower. And transfer of pollen grain shed from anther to the stigma of pistil is known as pollination. Usually the process requires the help of certain agents. These agents can be wind, water, or some insect. Now, when do these agents become essential? When for some reason plant's own pollen cannot pollinate its own ovule. Now, pollination can be self-pollination if the transfer of pollen occurs in the same flower. If the pollen is transferred from one flower to another, it is known as cross-pollination. Now we come to fertilization. Fertilization is the fusion of male and female gametes to give the zygote. This zygote can form the new plant. Now for fusion to occur, first the pollen lands on stigma, then a pollen tube begins to grow from stigma to ovule. This pollen tube carries the male gamete to the ovule where the female gamete is present. Now you can see this pollen tube passes through the style of the pistil. Once the pollen tube reaches the ovule, the male gamete is introduced inside the ovule. After fertilization, the zygote is formed. This zygote divides again and again many times to form an embryo inside the ovule. Now once the zygote is formed, the flower has served its purpose. The floral parts will start to develop. What happens to the different floral part? Let's see. The ovule forms the seed. It develops a tough coat and is gradually converted into a seed. The ovary grows rapidly and it ripens to form the fruit. Meanwhile, the petals, sepals, stamen, style and stigma, these may dry and fall off. So the seed, this is the final product of sexual reproduction and it has all the key players that are required for the development of new plant. The seed has three main parts: the seed coat, cotyledons and the embryo. Now let's see what are the functions of each of these. The seed coat is tough and it is made by hardening of the ovule walls. The cotyledons, they are thick and swollen and they store the food reserves. The embryo, this has the plumule and the radicle and this will develop into the new plant. Now what is the function of seed coat? It is protective. The cotyledons provide nutrition and the plumule and the radicle develop into the new plant. The plumule forms the shoot system and the radicle forms the root system. With this we come to the end of this session. Here are your questions for solving. Wish you all the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.